Hello everyone, this is the guest lecture by Zhiqian from Mass Art in the mini course of computation. And today Zhiqian is going to talk about the connection between art and computation. And I personally know Zhiqian through also something related to art, it's like classical music. Yeah, we have some common friends who go to like a Boston Symphony Orchestra regularly. And she's a very inspiring person. She's a very artistic person. And in the meantime, she also loves philosophy a lot. So I think this talk will be very unique in the sense that it's actually a combination of art and computation and some philosophical thinking. Yeah, so let's welcome Zhiqian to the amazing talk.
Hello everyone, I'm Zhiqian. So I can start my talk right now, right? You heard it?
Yes.
Okay, great, perfect. So yeah, when Chi-Ning first invited me to talk about the relationship between computation and art, so what shows up in my mind was something like some application of data visualization, artificial intelligence, or virtual reality, or like those fancy designer stuff, or like some architecture, that kind of stuff. So I wasn't sure how to enter this topic at first, so I decided to get some advice from Google. So I Google it, and it shows that computation consists of all the changes brought about by digital technology. Art is an open set of ways of acting inventively in culture. Mixing the two together in a systematic way gives a computational art. So as a qualified conceptual artist who spend most of my time thinking about what's the fundamental meaning of everything, I have to ask the question, what are you talking about? So in this lecture, I'm going to ask those important questions and examine the underlying relationship between the two, and in a more abstract sense or in a more philosophical sense. So if you're expecting a lecture on how should art combine the utility aspect of computer science, you might go to the wrong place. But I hope you will still enjoy the talk because it's gonna be fun. So in order to answer this question, I think we need to examine it from our history points of view. So let's go back a little bit in time, shall we? So at the beginning of everything, well, that's a little bit too far back. So at the beginning of mankind, at around 40,000 to 14,000 years ago, humans started to know how to use tool. So we started to be able to represent the reality or the story around how we understand the reality in a really primitive way. Later on, and it's before like 1 AD, we categorize the art from that historical time period as ancient art. So we can see that at the time, our understanding of human figure are still at a really primitive stage. So after that, something happened. It was the fall of the Roman Empire. After that, we entered a period that we call medieval period. We can see that at that time, the understanding of human form is very flat and two-dimensional. And most of the things in art are about like religion and for like religious purpose. So this period is very easy to recognize. As long as you see like a little circle on the head of the character, or it have like a goldenish tone, or it looks like religiously or have like a funny face, you can see, you can conclude that it's like medieval period of art. Also, we also refer to this historical period as the Dark Age. The reason why it's called Dark Age is because the main character of this time period is nothing really happens. We can see as a decline in our science, economy, and or like our civilization in general. So after the Dark Age, there are a spark of light emerge in the history of mankind. So we enter the period of Renaissance. And Renaissance is like the congregate advancement of human understanding of physical reality, shown by the progression of art, philosophy, and science. We also started to have an anatomy, so we can understand the structure of human form, and we started to have a sense of perfect proportion in mathematical or like geometric. So at the time, we started to recognize individual artists like Leonardo da Vinci. If you remember from the from the previous lecture by Chi-Ning, we can adopt this free word model by Penrose in understanding what Da Vinci is trying to do. We can think about artists as the mental world. And then through these mental processes, he's trying to use art as a media to translate the physical world into the perfect mathematical world in a Platonic sense, in finding the perfect proportion of human body. And after Renaissance period, we came to the 19th century, and there are several art movements happening at the time, such as Impressionism. For my personal view, I believe this movement is highly associated with intention of transportable paint, so that artists can carry outdoor and capture the transition of time through the change of light, and that's why we call it as Impressionism. So there's a lot of famous artists at the time, such as like Monet or Van Gogh. And for Vincent van Gogh, his family cut off his ear and living asylum and creating more than 2,000 artwork in his lifetime. And eventually he died at the age of 37, I guess. Yeah. After that, we also have artists like Pablo Picasso, who kind of distorted the reality and transforming it into his own style. So for him, what he really was created is not only the painting itself, but also about a way of how he abstractionalized the reality in a visual sense. So later on, we also have artists like Malevich. So for the middle one, it's called Flying Airplane. Instead of directly represent the airplane, he was intended to convey the sensation of mechanical fly using pure geometric shape. So he considered the suprematism as a new realism in art. And finally, he created Black Square and claimed that this is the first step of pure creation in art and the embryo of all potentials. And after that, we also have this famous abstract artist, Mark Rafko, who eventually committed suicide due to the extreme emotion that he had experienced throughout his lifetime. So this is a quote from him, which is, I'm not interested in the relationship of color or form or anything else. I'm interested only in expressing basic human emotion, tragedy, ecstasy, doom, and so on. And the fact that lots of people break down and cry when confronted with my pictures shows that I can communicate those basic human emotion. So people always associate experience of his painting as religious experience. This is a picture of his chapel at Texas, located at Texas. People go there for religious purpose, but not for like a specific religion. And after that, we also have Jackson Pollock, who is one of the most famous American painters in the 20th century, which used the action and movement of human body as an auto generator to generate the final product of art. And another important artist that I need to mention is Marcel Duchamp. He put a urinal into a museum in the 1920s and claimed that this is a work of art. It is worth notice that he's not trying to say that ready-made object has aesthetic value and we should consider it as beautiful, but rather he's claiming that even urinals should be considered as an work of art, independent of the consideration of aesthetic value. and which means after him, art does not need to be beautiful. So for now, we have looking through the highly concentrated version of Western art history until modernism. So if we zoom out from like a bird eye or God eye perspective, we can see that the progression of art is starting from like the most primitive representation of reality to the peak in the Renaissance period, where our knowledge of proportion in human body and our knowledge in mathematical or physical world have reached approximation to perfection. And after that, we started to have individual artists and consider art as a way to express individual way of abstraction. And finally, it inevitably reached the pure abstraction, which is like the black canvas that you can see. So now, wait a second. What is the relationship between art and computation again? So for me, if we think about it as a computational problem, we can put it into a formula and to think about our experience of physical world as the input and artist as algorithm, and the final product of art as output, and ask the question such as, what is the input information, or what is happening during the creative process, or what is art actually doing, or what does art actually represent? So for me, surprisingly, this formula can apply to most of the art that we have discussed so far. So for example, in the prehistorical time period, we can think about artists as an algorithm to take information from physical world, and then to the output as a representation of their primitive understanding of the physical world. So the final product is about the story of their life and their understanding. In the case of Leonardo da Vinci, we can think about him as an algorithm to generate the output as the truth in mathematical world. So we can call it like a priori truth, or like a Platonic truth, or whatever. So it is worth notice that when we use the word true, people usually refer to really different meanings, and it always like cause a lot of confusion, and especially related to like the current debate in philosophy. However, I mentioned here, we can separate as a three really basic different meaning, which is the first one is like 1 + 1 = true is true. This kind of truth is independent of what is actually happening in the physical reality and what we can experience. And the second one is the claim that the snow is white is true, which we usually refer that as there actually this phenomenon of or object or things that we call snow, and the color of it is white. So there's this association of the sentences into the reality, to the reality that we're actually living in. The third way of using is something like art is to capture the truth of nature. And when we use this kind of truth, what we meant is more metaphorically. So if we apply the previous formula to Vincent van Gogh, we can see that the output is his personal true representation of reality, which is highly distorted or presumably like hallucinating. And all of the craziness and bipolar emotion or strong emotion that he experienced from his like personal subjective point of view. And we can also apply this to the case of Rafko, which the final output can be considered as the final truth for totality, and that's how I get the name of the lecture from, in a pure abstract way in capturing the sensitivity of human emotion. And we can also apply it to Jackson Pollock, to see that his body and movement as an auto generator in generating the final product of art. We can see that in this sense, the input of human experience associated with physical reality have no longer an important factor in making art. And if we apply it to the case of Marcel Duchamp, not only the role of physical reality have become not important anymore, the role of artists as an algorithm itself loses its legitimacy. So the ready-made itself becomes the work of art without the ontological difference between the actual urinal with utility. So then, since everything we can consider it as a work of art, so a curious kid can ask the question such as, so what is the nature of beauty? What is art? What is the shared property of something that we consider as beautiful? So is beauty computable? So here I kind of insert a quote by Oscar Wilde. I'm like doing the same thing that Chi-Ning have been doing, like inserting quotes. So beauty has many meanings as men have moods. Beauty is the symbol of symbols. Beauty reveals everything because it expresses nothing. When it shows up itself, it shows up the whole fairy colored world. So this might be give a slightly insights of what I'm going to talk about next. Oops. So for me, we can conclude this question into a formula in understanding what is beauty. So in order to know what is the nature of beauty, we first need to understand, we first need to look at what is the algorithm of beauty, or simply like what's going on in this algorithm. So first, we can ask the question of, is beauty objective or is beauty subjective? And this question is actually an important debate throughout the history of philosophy. So for me, in our ordinary language, we sometimes have the statements such as beauty is true or beauty is eternal, which refer beauty as objective. And we also have the statements such as beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which refer beauty as subjective experience. So having an objective property means that the property will not change based on the subjective experience, such as a physical fact. The subjective property means the property associated with individual experience, such as the taste of a cinema roll. So this question is become like, is beauty more like being 500 pounds, or is beauty more like taste good? So the traditional method that we have is to list out different property that different thing that we consider as beautiful, and then to list out the property that they all share, and to figure out whether those properties are subjective or objective can tell us whether or not beauty is subjective or objective. However, there are some problems in this model, and we think that we no longer want to adopt this model anymore. So lucky for mankind, we have philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein, who is, from my perspective, the most important philosopher in the 20th century, and also my personal favorite and my academic crush. He proposed that the idea of family resemblance in understanding how the meaning of our language work or the categories being constructed. So in this theory, he used the term as an analogy, family resemblance, for how categories are constructed. Within a family, member typically may be small, thin, impulsive, and proud. They normally have black hair or dark eyes. However, not every members of the family process each feature. there are no defining feature. Family resemblance is best captured by similarity between individual member and family. So we can think about, in which he also suggests that beauty cannot be clearly defined, and it can be only be we can only learn it by showing. So we can think about like the category of family, this category to understand what beauty actually means. So we can take a look at this like toy model. We can think about different experience of beauty have similarity or the same character to each others. Some of them might be overlap, but there's no like one shared property that they all share of within the same family members. So for example, like we can list out different experience that we think as beautiful, such as like the sculpture of David, like the Euler equation, like the experience when we look at the night sky, or like the Bach music. So there are some shared connection, a character trait between a different experience, such as when we look at the night sky and the David sculpture, we think about the connection as they are both express the same feeling of harmony or ideal, or like when we can think about like the Bach music and looking at night sky both share the property of sublime. So this way of viewing can provide better insight in understanding what beauty actually means. However, in reality, I believe like the connection are way more complicated than the toy model. You could be like interconnected with each other and have all different kinds of association with each other in defining or understanding what is the beauty, or how do we use the word beauty. So when we experience beauty, there are property associated with our experience, such as objective property like simplicity, unity, awe, stillness, flow, motion, harmony, or we may simply refer to something as beauty as good or positive. And later on, when we experience something that have the association with this property, we conclude that those are beautiful experience from our subjective experience. So this is another model to demonstrate the relationship between objective experience of beauty and our subjective experience of beauty. So we can see that we can first like having those objective experience, and then they have certain property or trait, and then when we experience something share the same property or trait of the objective experience, we can identify those experience as beautiful in our subjective sense. For example, we can think about when we're looking at the night sky, we have this connection about like reflecting bright light or visually stimulation. And then when some individual looking at shiny shoes, they can think that, oh, I think this is beautiful from my subjective points of view. Or when we listen to a symphony, we can have in this trait such as like sensational stimulation, or like the release of dopamine, or like the richness or the reminders of like childhood or hometown. And it can associate to like the experience of eating a pancake. So as for now, we have like a 5 main point that we have discussed to understand what is the nature of beauty. The first one is there's no one single shared property among all beautiful things. Beauty cannot be defined, can only be shown. The category of beauty is constructed by family resemblance. Our subjective experience of beauty can derive from the objective experience or property. Beauty is both subjective and objective, depends on what is the context when we use the word. So I think it's a good time if anyone have any questions so far.
Yes, so maybe let me read out some of the questions in the chat. Yeah, so I think the first question actually is asked by 2 people, by Bing and Lisa. They all ask similar questions about like whether this history of art, yeah, like also happen in other culture? And is there any like a kind of parallelism like to develop of science and economy, etc.? Yeah, would you comment on this? Yeah.
That's very interesting because the model that I was telling you about is only specifically in Western culture. So for in like such as in Eastern culture, the relationship might be completely different. It might be like the opposite because we already use the abstraction or like the flat in a very big in the beginning of like the history. So this model is only like is very specific and have no like parallel to like other culture. But I think it is very related to other subfields such as like science and philosophy in terms of because a lot of influence in art are associated with that, such as like in Renaissance period we have this advancement in understanding about proportion, mathematics, and science. And later on, it actually influenced the Enlightenment movement, and which is highly associated with like the other fields such as like philosophy and like science and etc. So I think the reason why you have connection is because the history itself are highly connected with each other. Yeah. So if there's no further question, I can move on.
There are two other questions, but maybe I can, it's very simple to state. You can decide if you want to address. One is by Yasar asking, like maybe mental impressions can also serve as the input to some modern artists, yeah, in the later period. Yeah, and the second question is by the roof. Yeah, it's asking how is simplicity an objective property?
Oh, how is so? I'm not saying that simplicity. So when we think about beauty, when I say about objective property, I'm not meaning that it's completely objective. It's just that those properties are can be found in a lot of shared by a lot of art or a lot of things that we consider as beautiful. So when we experience there are a lot of like mathematical equation that we use or by like physicists, like simplicity are an important value in deciding the aesthetic value of the whether or not a scientist would want to spend more time in develop those like theory or etc. So we can say about it as like a aesthetic that we both agree that there's some value in that. I can talk about it later, so maybe I can like keep doing my lecture and then come back to that. If that sounds good. Okay. So so right now we have addressed the problem of what is beauty. So right now the problem are come to what is art? So the question is what makes an art? A simple answer is that it's by the association and connection of what we identify as art from the past. For example, why do we think Rafko painting is a work of art? So the association from the previous art is that it's all by professional artists. It's put in the museum. It both convey the same feeling of ideal sublime, or it's the same, or like it have the same religious purpose, even though it's not for a specific religion. And it all share the same property of pure abstraction or sublime. So it can also apply to this case. So why is this art? It's because it is put in the museum and it's by professional artists, and he claimed that this is a work of art. So what is this art? And so I can explain it a little bit. So this is a performance art that some random guy who claimed himself as an artist, he ate a banana that was put in the museum originally as a work of art. So there's two art is happening here. So the art that I'm talking about is the performance of eating this work of art, which worth a lot of money. So the only connection here is that the claim that everything can be considered as art. So that is why we think that is a work of art. So we can see that there's no minimal requirement of what can be considered as art. It does not need to be beautiful. It does not need to be a physical object. It does not even need to be in the museum. As long as there's a mutual agreement within each party who is communicating, agreeing that such object is a piece of art, we can say that this is art. And we can use the same structure of family resemblance in understanding what is art. But this is not actually saying anything about the value of art or what should be art. So if everything can be considered as art, then what is not art? Or why do we favor something as art and not others? And what will happen? What should happen after the urinal? So is AI art? Will human artists be replaced? Is there any special property specifically shared in human art? So the question that I'm asking right now is, what is the relationship between AI and human art? So we can see that this is a model of how easy the different area can be replaced by AI. So we can see that the most low area can be quickly replaced by AI. And we can see that like the cinematography and book writing, AI design, science and art is the highest level that could be seen as like the last one could be replaced. So here is the thing that we need to talk about. So we can think about art as a search problem. So what is actually going on in the inspiration of the artist? So we can think about this little thing and to ask, how does human creativity plays an important role in art making process? Our guest speaker Andrew has already gave a wonderful talk on this specific subject. If you somehow missed the lecture, you can find the recording version. But anyhow, for my own understanding, human creativity is a unique pattern of information processing, and we can associate with our intuition. We took information from the physical world and process it for a specific pattern and generate clear thought linearly through our language. So it is not true that every human shares the same pattern, but each pattern shares a similarity due to the biological similarity. So this means our awareness of our creativity is restrained by the limit of language, while our creativity itself is not. So we can think about this pattern as making association and connection of different information, generating new combination of information. And it is related to the use of analogy and metaphor in our language. So this is a really simple toy model of the differences between the weak and strong AI producing art right now versus human artists in processing information. So for the AI right now, it's like taking information, a lot of information from the data of pre-existing artists from the past and generate similar pattern using those information. But for human, we took inspiration from the information that we receive in a really complicated way. We can take information from like, I don't know, a random apple that you eat in the morning, or a simple conversation with your friend, or any detail in life, or something grandeur, or anything, or any art that you experience. So this two mode is really different. So here I want to mention about the different types of AI that we were discussing. So the weak AI is the single task AI, which means it only focus on like finishing one single task. The strong AI is like, we can consider it as like human level intelligence. So the super AI surpass human intelligent ability. So it also known as artificial super intelligent or super intelligent. It's the best at everything like math, science, medicine, hobbies, and everything that you can conceive of. Even the brightest human mind cannot come close to the ability of super AI. So I'm only having this shape right now, but the actual situation is more like the region of super AI could be like that. So I distinguish simple differences between the differences between the art that made by weak and strong AI, super AI, and human. So we can see that the weak and strong AI, it have the character of is followed by formula tendency toward the sameness, and only based on past information, and is serve a clear purpose that human provide. And the super AI, we can think about it as it does not need to follow a certain formula, and it have more diversity. It does not need to follow from the past. It's non-linear. It's programmed to appear to have human emotion, or we can think about it have the knowledge in human psychology. And for human, we can think about it as a diversity, and does not need to follow from the past, non-linear, and it contains human emotion. And for my perspective, I add some different aspects that we can think about, such as we can think about human art have certain logical leap, or it contains free will, or it has input from the actual subjective experience instead of the knowledge or the data of subjective experience. And you have a sense of specificity associated with individual artists, and its justifiable arbitrariness can be appear in human art. And you have a search for meaning or true or totality, or you have the needs for religion purpose, or you have the actual experience in human making of the artwork. So right now I can have a quick vote with only those 3 buttons. So do you think can human artists be replaced by future AI? I want to see the answer. Huh.
And in case people don't know how to vote, you can click the reaction button. Yeah, and then vote.
No one choose the 3rd one, huh? Huh. Hmm. Well, I guess it's like 50 and 50, right? It's around like half and half. Interesting. Okay, so interesting. So we can imagine a future world where this is only my personal perspective. So we can imagine a future world that most jobs have easily replaced by AI. I don't know what I was talking about. So most work can easily be replaced by AI, and human will set free from the laboring job, and people have larger amount of free time, and people are living in a virtual society, or like people are being digitalized. So there's some question to think about is that how should art be considered in that future world, and how should people spend their time? What is the purpose and meaning of life? So is people gonna spend their time playing games, or should they spend time making art, or producing culture, or constructing a society in digital world that we can like associate with like the metaverse or like NFT? And should they spend time in finding the meaning of personal truth, or should we consider art as a pathway to reach the magnificence of totality? So the question of what cannot be replaced by AI in the topic of art, for me personally, I think is a human experience. It is conceivable to imagine a future scenario in which we can find a way to map the specific human way of processing information or the approximation of and generate art and eventually replace human artists by super AI. However, it cannot replace the real experience in the process of making work by human artists, as well as the experience from the audience. There might not be an ontological difference between carbon-based and silicon-based machine, but our subjective experience of the reality are still considered as special, that we can feel the information or understand it and creating meaningful interpretation. That level of awareness and needs to create meaning might be something that super AI does not share with us. We can either think about it as our self-conscious or our this whatever I was talking about as a revolutionary thought, or we can think about it as a lucky gift that we receive that makes us special and make our life meaningful. And and then the question becomes I was mentioning about like human understanding. So what is the human understanding actually mean? So for my own answer is that we can think about understanding as a form of data compression. For example, if we have a map that is the same size of Earth with the same accuracy, the maps will not be meaningful and useful. So the reason why it's meaningful and useful is because it compresses the data and it ignores certain details that is not important. So human understanding is a way of compressing data in a specific way. We compress data into human understanding or human language, such as water, or rock, or chair, so that those data can be meaningful and useful to us. So the same data compression, in theory, can be captured or executed well by artificial intelligence in the future. But what is missing here is the conscious receiver of those asymmetric compressed data by human. So one interesting thing or aspect or example, oops. Wait a second, I don't know. So one interesting thing we can consider is that we can have a thought experience that if there's a human being who's like super smart, and she can learn everything in the world and possess all of the knowledge that she have, and she know everything about the color red and all of the human psychology of and knowledge about the color red, but somehow due to some psychological illness, she live in a world of black and white, so she cannot experience the color red or like any color in her whole life. So one day she suddenly see an apple, and magically she actually experienced the color red. So she say, wow, this is amazing. I finally see this color. I finally know what it means. So for me, this feeling of wow is what I call human experience from the last slide. So I guess this is so I put it here. It's only from my personal perspective. Art is meaningless without human understanding. And I guess yeah, this is like we can have some like question and if anyone have any question.
Yeah, I'm still monitoring, but from my impression, it looks like mostly like people's comments, yeah, and discussions. Yeah, but if people have concrete questions and want to ask, maybe you can directly shout out.
Oh, it doesn't even need to be question. If you have any perspective or insight you want to say, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I do have something I want to discuss about, also related to debate in chat about like super AI, but I think you are going to mention a bit in the later slides, so maybe we can.
No, I think this is the end of the lecture.
Oh, but I thought you have the things. Ah, okay. You
No,
remove that? Okay. No problem. Then maybe let's first thank Zhiqian first, and then we can continue discussion questions.
yeah, this is just yeah. Let me just quickly mention the recommendation of book. So there's some like related book to art if you're interested in art. So there's just like blah blah and for some specific artists. And I would highly recommend like the linguistic and philosophic section, which is like metaphor we live by and surface and essence and philosophical investigation. It might be a little bit boring or hard to understand, but for the big question one, I didn't read it myself, but it was like recommended by a lot of people, and I think this is it could provide a basic understanding from a history point of view about how philosophy have progressed. So if you're interested in, and a lot of people recommend this book. So there's another book that is somehow related or like indirectly related to the talk. The first one is Life 3.0 is about artificial intelligence. It's by a professor at MIT called Max Tegmark. I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about also question that he posed, but it's not very like detailed or it's not very like specific or yeah. So you can think about it as a way to generate more thought. So I do like really recommend the first one, and the other one is just like some interesting book that indirectly related to the talk. Anyhow, and I guess this is the end. And I can put so this is my contact information. If you have any question or you want to do any collaboration, feel free to just email me or yeah. And I'm really happy and approachable to answer any question, or if you have any idea to share or any collaboration, just feel free to email me. And
yes, through probably a second course by Chi-Ning.
yeah, so this is a perfect way of ending the lecture is image of Galileo's middle finger. Okay, so this is the end of lecture and we can have more discussion, and let me just share my screen. Okay.
Let's thank Zhiqian. Sorry for misunderstanding like the end of your talk. Yeah, but let's give a formal claps now. Yeah, and I do think people have lots of questions. Yeah, and I also have a lot, but maybe I'll let people to ask first. Yeah, feel free to just unmute yourself. Yeah, or any comments you want to make. Okay, so maybe then if people want to generously let me ask first, I'll be happy. Yeah, so I guess my first question will be related to the discussion in the chat about like super AI, etc. Yeah, so I'm maybe interested in your opinion and other people's opinion, but at least the way I view super AI, maybe I'm thinking more like a hypothetic model. Yeah, like okay, maybe we first imagine like what's the most powerful situation, can happen and study its power. For example, this is related to the previous lecture when we talk about MIP star. Yeah, the model itself might not be physically relevant or realistic. Yeah, but let's try to explore the limit. Yeah, so in your opinion, do you think like this kind of super AI and connection to art, like how is connection to reality? Like yeah, do you really have in mind that it can be implementable, or maybe it's more like a thought experiment? And if it is just a thought experiment, yeah, what can it really tell us?
Huh. So this is a really interesting question, but also the question is, I don't personally know, and I do think that no one's actually know this answer, because we does not have any information about our future. So and we can conclude from our like progression of technology that we are always like we are always have at technology advancement, and the progression is like actually improving in a really fast way, and it's really hard to predict what it will actually happen in the future. So I don't think it's the same as the discussion about the same about like the mathematical debate about the infinite. This kind of debate is more about to if we have a super AI that is approximate of being able to replace human intelligence or way smarter than human, what should we do and how should we see about this? And I think the main problem is, what should we think about the purpose of that super AI should be? So should the purpose of that super AI the same as human? What if it have its own purpose? What if it somehow haven't need to like do something else that is different than human survival, or is incompatible of human existence, or incompatible of humans meaning? How should we consider that? And before we invented this before we actually having this super AI, I think this is the most important time period to discuss this kind of question, because we have not had that yet. So in some sense, we can still controlling some aspect of that, that like that advancement or the improvement throughout history. Yeah.
Yeah, some people also asking in the chat, yeah, wait, like what is the purpose of humans? Yeah.
Oh, I'm not saying that there is a purpose of human. I'm just saying that it might be a purpose for AI, because we are the inventor of AI, and our way of thinking AI right now is more like a tool in helping us. So it is a legitimate question to think about, like, how should we think about the purpose of AI? And I don't think that there's a creator or inventor of human and it should be like a purpose of human.
Yeah, then I want to follow up the question a little bit. Then maybe when there's a real super AI, either hypothetically or happening in the future, maybe then there will be a new form of art emerge. Yeah, because if we regard art as something like, especially through the historical like view you introduced, it's like something emerged from like a human. Yeah, maybe for super AI, according to its own anatomy and its own like computation, maybe there will be a new form of something we will call art. Yeah.
Of course, like everything is possible, and our, as I mentioned before, our understanding of art or the use of word art are just based on some like what have happened in the past. So we can, so it is more about how do we use the language in future, and we actually don't know how we should what we would consider as art in the future. It's possible that we invented some new language and to describe something, share the similar property of the art that we already have right now, and that thing and whatever that is might be wonderful, but it also might be like harmful. So we just don't know for sure.
Thanks. Any people have more questions? Yeah.
I had a small comment to make. So in one of the slides, I mean the concluding slides, she had written for art, human understanding and human experience is necessary, right? I mean, I saw that somewhere. Am I quoting it right? So the moment we say this, is there a point in asking whether AI can replace humans in creating art? Because the way we define art itself is through a human quality or a human experience. So the moment we say this, is there any point in asking anything else, like a plant or like a like a water bottle could create art? Is there any point in asking that? Is my question.
So you're asking that, is there any point in asking whether something is art?
No, I mean, I'm still confused about the way we define art, to be honest.
Oh, so as I mentioned before, I think you're getting the right picture, is that there's no way to define art. So that's what I want to say. There's no one clear way in defining art. So as long as when two of us discussing, we agree that something is art, that we will say that is art. But that's my point. So there's no any like metaphysical or foundational thing that to say that something is art itself. It's
So
just art,
tomorrow,
whatever. Yeah, it depends
so,
on
so
how we
tomorrow, if I create an artificial intelligence entity which somehow agrees that something is art, and then I also conform with it, then can I say that that particular thing is art? It's not a human that's agreeing to. It's not another human that's agreeing to uh, to this definition of art. So I mean that's the point where I'm confused. We are restricting art to a solely human experience, right? So why bother bringing anything other than human into it?
No. I'm not saying that we should restraining art into only like human experience. The thing is that the reason why we can ask the question about what is art is that I already say that there's no one way to define art, but we can still find some element might be related to art that is special, and we can at least to think more about that aspect in understanding about what we usually consider it as art. And I'm saying that human experience is a really special property that is present there. And that's what we make, that's why it make human art special, or human experience in viewing the art special. It's definitely possible that future AI can create work of art, but without the human experience in viewing the art, that thing we can still consider it as art, but it's not meaningless to us. Yeah, or it's not connected to us. It's just, yeah, it's just there.
Sure. Thanks.
Oh yeah, Zima Blue. That's really interesting.
So I had one, it's a comment and a question. It's referring to those slides where you had an input scene, and then you had an artist, and then an output scene. So it's kind of a very, very concise and good model. And we have had apps like that, right? We have had an app that takes in a picture and sort of convolutes in such a way that it looks like a Van Gogh painting and those things. So these kind of operators are realizable, but you also had examples of later artists that don't conform to this simple models where no input corresponds to an output. So I mean, but there could be some way you can define it, right? Either that artist takes something and just spits out something random, or is there some correlation, right? There could be things that are affecting the artist, like the artist that was drawing, drawing streaks of paints on a large canvas, so that the movements are being affected by what he's seeing around him and those things, right? Or are those artists just like points of singularity, like not connected nodes? If you imagine a network sort of thing, what is it?
Can you rephrase about your question?
Right. I mean, so the later artists that you said that their point was that art is not something meaningful, and you cannot just take a scene and represent something. They don't represent anything. They're just random things.
Yeah.
So it looks like they did it because they wanted to make a point, right? They're not transforming anything. So can we say that they're taking something and just spitting out something completely random? They're receiving an input and just no, right? There's some correlation between what they see and what they actually create.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
And I didn't mention what is happening after the urinal, but after that, we enter a period of contemporary art. So in contemporary art, there are so many spectacle about like the combination of different things, and to say that anything can be art. And it's just really interesting to think about what people can consider it as art. And for example, like some people creating some human-made waterfall and to consider it as a work of art, and some people creating some complex system, such as to pull like biological processing about how different I don't know, just some people even like put a shark into a museum or gallery to claim that shark is a work of art. So after that, people just go wild and to say that everything could be art. So what I'm concerning is in the area that everything can be considered art in principle, what should be the types of art that actually possess some value that is in favor of humanity, or is like important for like our civilization, or in furthering our civilization. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any more comments or questions? Yeah, feel free to just unmute or share in the chat. Yeah, I guess there's also some discussion about like how does a social tradition or like plays a role. Yeah, and also like how does like the biological self, like how does the neural activity or gene plays a role. Yeah, but I'm not sure how far this direction will go. Yeah, but feel free if you want to say something regarding this. Yeah. Oh, and also Lisa raised her hand.
Yeah, I just had actually, yeah, I guess I just happen to have a lot of thoughts on this, but I actually just had a personal question. Do you study what do you study? Do you study art history or like the philosophy of art, or do you also like create art yourself?
Yeah, it's complicated. My major is actually sculpture and interactive media, but that doesn't actually mean anything. I'm just interested in like anything. Yeah.
Actually, I went to one of Zhiqian's work maybe 2 months ago or 1 month ago. Yeah, it's a very cool conceptual art and using some ideas from like, I don't know, some modern physics. Yeah, very interesting actually. Yeah. Yeah, so I encourage people to follow her. Yeah, like go to her next exhibitions. Mm. Yes. Okay, so if there's no further question, let me maybe first stop the recording, and we can still stay if people want to talk anything, but let's thank Zhiqian again. Thank you.